Prior to the Mafia setting its sights on Cuba, the island was already a land of contradictions, boasting breathtaking beauty, a booming sugar industry, and a vibrant culture. But beneath the surface, Cuba was a nation on the brink. Political instability, widespread corruption, and stark inequality plagued its people. In the early 20th century, Cuba was a political powder keg. The republic, established after gaining independence from Spain, was young and fragile. Presidents came and went, often with the help or the interference of the United States. For many Cubans, the dream of a prosperous free nation seemed increasingly out of reach, and by the early 1930s, that dream had turned into disillusionment. Then came Fulgencio Batista, a former sergeant in the Cuban army. Batista rose to power in 1933 through what became known as the Sergeants' Revolt. It wasn't a coup led by generals or politicians, it was a takeover by the military's lower ranks, led by a man who understood how to wield power in a country desperate for stability. At first, Batista presented himself as a reformer, a champion of the people. But behind the scenes, he aligned himself with Cuba's wealthy elite and American business interests. The island's economic growth came at a price: rising inequality, censorship, and an increasingly corrupt government. Batista's iron grip tightened, and by 1952, he would stage another coup, this time declaring himself dictator. For the rich and powerful, Batista's Cuba was a paradise. For the poor, it was a nightmare. Thousands lived in squalor, while Havana's elites and foreign tourists danced the night away. And it was in this gilded world of privilege and corruption that Batista's path crossed with the most unlikely of allies, the Italian Mafia. Batista understood the value of loyalty, but he also knew the price of power. To fund his regime, he opened Cuba's doors to foreign investments, both legitimate and otherwise. And when the Italian Mafia came knocking, Batista welcomed them with open arms. Through Meyer Lansky, a trusted figure in the American and Italian Mafia, Batista struck a lucrative deal. In exchange for generous bribes, Batista granted the Mafia free rein to operate in Cuba. Casinos, nightclubs, and luxurious hotels were handed over to mobsters eager to expand their empires. Batista even passed laws to protect their interests, turning Havana into a playground for criminals, tourists, and gamblers alike. Alongside Lucky Luciano, Meyer Lansky was another key figure in the Mafia's expansion into Cuba. Born to a poor Jewish family in Poland, Meyer Lansky grew up on the same New York streets as Luciano. The two forged a bond that would change the criminal world forever. Where Luciano was the visionary, Lansky was the architect. He wasn't just a mobster, he was a financial mastermind. Lansky understood how to turn criminal enterprises into legitimate-looking businesses. And in Cuba, he saw an opportunity to create a gangster's paradise. Under Lansky's direction, Havana's casinos became more than gambling dens. They were elite destinations for the world's wealthy. Lansky even convinced Batista to take a cut of the profits, ensuring government cooperation while solidifying the Mafia's grip on the island. In December 1946, Luciano and Lansky hosted the infamous Havana Conference at the Hotel Nacional. It was the first major Mafia summit since the end of Prohibition, a gathering of the most powerful mobsters in the world. The agenda: to divide territories, resolve disputes, and approve new ventures, including the expansion of the drug trade. With Luciano at the helm and Lansky managing the finances, the Mafia had never been stronger. But their growing success in Cuba would also draw attention they couldn't afford. Luciano's time in Cuba wouldn't last long. Under pressure from the US government, Cuba expelled him in 1947. But by then, the Mafia's roots in Havana were already deep thanks to Lansky's meticulous planning. The question is, what happened next? How did this empire thrive and ultimately fall under the weight of revolution? Havana, in the 1950s, was unlike anything the world had ever seen. But what did this Mafia-controlled empire truly look like at its height? At its peak, the Mafia's grip on Cuba extended far beyond the casinos. They controlled hotels, restaurants, and even sections of the Cuban government. Meyer Lansky, known as the mob's accountant, oversaw operations worth millions millions of dollars a year, all while maintaining a luxurious lifestyle in Havana. But this golden age came at a cost. The mafia's deep ties with Batista's regime created resentment among ordinary Cubans who saw their country being sold off to foreign interests. Beneath the glamour, tension was brewing, a storm that would soon change everything.